Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the next 30 minutes, we'll make a speed run through all the key business news stories you need to know about from across the African continent, from Lagos to Cairo and from Lagos to Cairo and Johannesburg to Nairobi. We've got you covered. The World Bank is pledging more support to recession-threatened Ebola-hit West African countries. We'll have the details. It seems there's a turnaround in Egypt as far as tourism numbers are concerned. We'll have the details on that too. And we'll also be looking at the hoops that small traders in the DRC and Congo-Brazzaville have to jump to in order to trade across their border. Let's start tonight in ground zero for the Ebola outbreak. The warning from the World Bank that the economies of the three main countries affected by the epidemic will most likely contract next year. The bank is forecasting negative GDP growth of 0.2% in Guinea compared to pre-crisis growth estimates of 4.3% and a contraction of about 2% in Sierra Leone compared to a pre-Ebola crisis outbreak of 8.9%. Now, in Liberia, where there are signs of progress in containing the disease and some increasing economic activity, the updated 2015 growth forecast is just 3%. World Bank President Jim Yong Kim is visiting West Africa to assess the epidemic's impact and to talk with government and international agencies about the steps that need to be taken to eradicate the virus.
We're not going to start new businesses now. We just want to support the businesses that are already operating, and these are mostly SMEs, and this is to keep operations going and to protect jobs. One thing for sure is that the Ebola crisis isn't over. There's still a lot of work to be done, and the World Bank Group is doing everything it can to do that. How long that will take, we don't know.
Our experience with MSMEs in Liberia is the one of dealing with very dynamic people who have learned over the years to take their destiny in their own hands. We really believe that once the problems will be tackled from the sanitation and health perspective, then also the recovery will be relatively fast.
Now, earlier in the day, the World Bank pledged further assistance to Liberia. It's the country worst hit by the current Ebola outbreak, which in and of itself is the worst on record. While in Liberia on Tuesday, the World Bank Group's president, Jim Yong Kim, promised additional support in Liberia to healthcare, infrastructure and the agriculture sectors over the next 18 months. He made those comments after meeting the Liberian president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. He said the World Bank was working within the International Monetary Fund as well as the African Development Bank on several tranches of budgetary support for the country. Now, CCTV's Angelo Coppola is in Liberia. He hit the streets of the capital, Monrovia, to talk to entrepreneurs and find out how they're coping with the epidemic.
Look, if there are in fact any economic green shoots appearing in a city, is on the streets. A couple of weeks ago, things were quiet here. Business was slow. People were scared.
Business been kind of slow in Liberia, most especially with the kind of business we do, because people are afraid, to be in the street, and people are afraid to get in contact with each other. And most especially the business we do, like hair bobbing, we dealing with blade combs.
It's been difficult that people don't come around to wash car, and then people are afraid of us interacting with them. And then they are also afraid of the Ebola virus does not translate and go around touching many people. So for that reason, it's very difficult for our job.
We're hearing that infection levels are dropping in the city, and this is a good sign. We're also hearing that there's an improvement in confidence levels. There are more people on the streets.
For the past 2 weeks ago, business are improving, people getting back to their normal activities or business going on. At least if you go in the marketplaces, you see people moving in and out.
Things are gone better just a little bit, but it's not changed to the level that we needed, because it brings a lot of differences, It's difficult as usual that we can see.
On the other hand, the humanitarian efforts from the foreign assistance groups means business is better in the telecommunications space, in and around the bigger hotels.
People use internet most of the time. So, like I was saying, it's not stable. Yeah, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Yeah, but usually at the end of the month, that's the time I really do good business.
Almost everyone has been touched by the virus.
I lose my friend, then I lose one of my father, Yes, and then I lose some of my better close friend. Yeah, because the Ebola virus.
I lost a friend who was close to me in my church. Yeah, he died 2 weeks ago. And we interacted, but it was so sad, man. Yeah, so sad.
I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Monrovia, Liberia.
And Angelo Coppola joins us now from Liberia's capital of Monrovia. Angelo, give us a sense of how SMEs are adapting to the Ebola outbreak in the capital.
Well, Roman, the chaps and people that we've been speaking to on those streets seem to be holding out. They seem to be looking for business opportunities to pick up. Many of them don't know anything other than what they're doing right now, like the barber and the car washer. So they're hoping that things will change by themselves. And as you know, the SMEs that are successful are the ones that adapt to the change. The problem is that there's so few gaps that are showing themselves at the moment that many of the entrepreneurs are chasing those gaps, but those gaps aren't increasing. So it's kind of a wait and see attitude at the moment. It's almost a survival thing. Raman?
Indeed. Médecins Sans Frontières has described the inflow of aid from the international community in response to the crisis as, and I'm quoting them here, sluggish and patchy. Is that a widely shared view in Liberia's private sector?
Well, the private sector aren't too keen to talk to us around the aid sector because it's coming in. They probably, unless they're directly benefiting from the aid, aren't going to see any benefit for themselves. So they're kind of sitting back and saying, look, we're here to get through the crisis. We're hoping that our businesses will be running when this crisis is over, and we're hoping that when the aid does start flowing a little bit more freely, that it will lead to an economic growth so that everybody prospers. But for now, it's kind of, as I said, with the SMEs, it's a survival mode that they're in. But things are looking up. Raman?
Indeed. Finally, Angelo, let's look at the macro picture here. Future World Bank aid will be focusing on healthcare, infrastructure and agriculture as well. Do we have any idea what form this debt will take and how exactly it's going to be employed?
Well, what we heard from the World Bank's Kim yesterday was the fact that their private sector business, as it were, the IFC, has signed a deal to make $7.5 million available to EcoBank. That's to try and inject a bit of liquidity into the local banking sector to invest in those agricultural, sanitation and urban infrastructure projects. It's an attempt to boost morale. And we also heard that the World Bank had convened a meeting in Accra amongst the businesses to get them to re-enter Liberia specifically, to try and get them back and interested. How they're going to incentivize them, what kind of debt vehicles are going to be put in place has yet to be ironed out. But it does appear that this is an attempt to bolster economic confidence and to lay the foundation. Raman?
Indeed, economic pump priming 101. We'll leave it there for the time being. That's Angelo Coppola. He's in the Liberian capital of Monrovia. He'll keep us updated right here on CCTV. Now, over in North Africa, about 2.8 million visitors visited Egypt in the third quarter of 2014. That's 70% more than the same period last year. The figure brought the total number of visitors this year to about 7.27 million up to the third quarter. But players in the sector aren't too optimistic. As Celestine Carine reports, they believe those numbers can and should be far better.
Tourists are slowly trickling back to Egypt. But 3 years after the overthrow of President Hosni Mubarak, the industry is still facing choppy waters. The government recently said it hoped numbers would rise by 10% this year and be back to pre-uprising levels next year. However, with a renewed threat from Islamist militants in the Sinai Peninsula, there is no guarantee. Officials say the Islamist insurgency is contained to a small corner of Sinai, far from the popular beach resorts further south. Players in the tourism industry are somewhat optimistic visitors will increase.
Our country, Egypt, is nice and people from all around the world come here. Foreigners feel safe here and they leave their bags and money with us when they visit sites and return to find they're still there.
More than 14.7 million tourists visited Egypt in 2010, dropping below 10 million in 2011. Visitors picked up in 2012 but shrunk again last year, and cruise boats still line the banks of the River Nile waiting for tourists to flood back.
Things have become very slow during the past 4 years of revolution. The entire country came to a standstill. Tourism stopped, and the people who wanted to take cruises down the Nile stopped doing so too.
Tourism revenues, once peaking at $12.5 billion a year, were less than half that in 2013 at $5.9 billion. They dropped to around $3 billion in the first half of 2014, when 4.5 million tourists visited. Celestine Caronay, CCTV.
Now, United Nations Forum on Business and Human Rights in Geneva has urged investors and businesses alike to take responsibility for upholding human rights in the countries in which they operate. Sudan-born mobile communications entrepreneur Mo Ibrahim reached out to other business owners, challenging them not to shy away from their roles alongside, of course, making profits for their shareholders. He listed business sectors that are prone to some human rights abuse, including oil and exploration and mining, especially in Africa. Nigeria is Africa's biggest single oil producer. It suffered enormous environmental damage due to oil spills in the Niger Delta, for example. The mangrove creeks in the Delta region are heavily polluted, partly due to leaks from illegal pipeline tapping and sabotage.
At least serious business people understand very well sustainability. You can only sustain business, can only have a long-term future if you're really running a decent business which is socially responsible and is taking care of both people and the planet. Take the oil and mining industry in Africa, for example. A number of oil companies till now keep their contracts secrets, for example. Which means nobody knows who is paying what whom. Sometimes even the finance minister doesn't know that. So we are fighting against this.
Weak and failed states are a particular challenge, and it does mean that the home state often has to step in and to take such measures to help the company to respect human rights. And so at the very start, we would ask that the home states actually alert the companies to the environment in which they're operating, either through using their embassies or expert advisors to tell them that, you know, there are much greater risks in operating in that environment. And one of the risks is in the abuse of people's rights there.
Quick run through equity markets here for you. Fairly mixed bag across the board. Biggest gains we're seeing are coming in from the EGX 30 over in Cairo. However, on the NSE 20, it closed relatively flat on the day. Safaricom, however, seems like it's going to close 2014 at a fairly decent clip. It's up by about 30% so far in the year to date. South Africa's economy looks up ahead of 2015. We'll have the numbers. And Mr. Jacob Zuma is in China for a state visit. He's leading a government and business delegation over there. We'll get the details on what they're after next.
Effects of the austerity measures are evident and were expected. Egyptians, however, seem to be patient about it. But El-Sisi told government he wants to control the prices promptly before people's patience runs out.
Welcome back to the program. You're still watching Global Business Africa from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Let's take it to South Africa. Its economy, most advanced in the continent, but it hasn't performed as well as economies had anticipated, with a worst blow coming after it was knocked off as Africa's biggest economy, given the rebasing exercise in Nigeria concluded sometime in the first quarter. Economists, however, are positive that growth will rebound next year, following improvements in the third quarter of 2014. Jane Keo has more.
South Africa's economy has shown mild signs of revival after a shaky start to the year. A series of industrial action in the mining and manufacturing sectors, persistent power outages, and an array of downgrades has led to a dip in the overall growth of the economy this year. But the situation is not all gloomy for Africa's most advanced economy.
The third quarter of 2014 grew by 1.4%. That's the main indicator. And then I think what's important this time is we also benchmark and rebased our national accounts from a 2005 base year to 2010. And with this benchmarking exercise, we also introduced the 2008 system of national accounts, which also on its own have some impacts on the levels. If you look at the base year, our nominal level lifts by 2.8%. And if you look at the 2008 contribution to that, it was 1.2% that the SNA had the influence on that nominal level lift.
Economists are upbeat that 2015 will be a better year, considering the significant improvements witnessed in the third quarter of this year.
The third quarter numbers do represent some improvement. I think if you look back at the first half of the year, we had the 5-month strike in the platinum sector, and then followed on shortly after that, we had the metal worker strike, and then numerous other difficulties which actually impacted on the economy. So first half of the year was very, very difficult. We're not fully out of the troubles. There's still infrastructure problems, for example, particularly on the electricity side. But probably the fourth quarter number is going to be even better than the third quarter figure, and we're certainly hoping that some momentum will be built up for 2015. But that's very dependent on labour relations, and in particular what's going to happen on the electricity side.
South Africa, which has traditionally traded with Europe and the United States, has seen its trade focus begin to change over the last decade. China is now its single largest trading partner.
What South Africa brings to the rest of the continent is a mix of developed and developing economies, and clearly a lot of our experience can actually be transposed in Africa, so to the benefit of all Africans. Clearly we can't be arrogant in the continent, we've got to know our place, but I do think that a lot of South African companies have done quite well in Africa, and they've also changed lives in Africa, you know, on the retail, the financial side, construction companies to a certain extent, and then of course the mining companies as well. There's been quite an aggressive expansion, and I think it's been mutually beneficial.
Economists argue that the biggest problem to South Africa's economic growth is power supply. Some argue that the privatization of South Africa's struggling state-owned companies might just be the solution to deal with the problem. Jean Keo, CCTV.
Now, speaking of South Africa, its president is leading a government and business delegation to China this week. China, as you just heard, is South Africa's single largest trading partner. Bilateral trade volumes between these two are worth about $27 billion. To figure out what's at stake, CCTV's Sumitra Naidu caught up with the country's trade and industry minister.
Well, China is our largest trading partner by individual countries, has been so both for imports and exports since 2009. So it is our largest single market. It's also a market that's been growing, steadily growing through the recession years. And it's unlike the situation in many parts of Western Europe, for example, where we haven't seen a recovery in some cases to the levels of trade we saw in 2008. So the Chinese market is important for us, and of course South Africa is the largest market on the African continent for China. So it's not a small market for them either.
What other areas are you looking at? Motor manufacturing, agriculture? There's
a delegation that includes a number of authorities from sanitary and phytosanitary standards set in bodies in South Africa that will be part of our delegation. They will be looking to open up the Chinese market for a range of agro-processing products which do depend on recognition of standards and sanitary and phytosanitary standards. And we've got about 100 business people that will be participating this time. We're focusing on quality rather than quantity. In 2011 there were more business people, but this time around the quality is higher. There will be a number of commercial contracts that will be signed, contracts with financing agencies as well. So I think we're taking a relationship which has been growing, we're taking it a step further forward, also in the business engagements that will be part of this particular visit.
In terms of job creation, are we looking good in terms of China investing in South Africa?
Well, I think we could do more. We could do a lot more. But I mean, we're beginning to see some traction taking place. As I said, automotives, television manufacturers, We've got ICT companies. There's quite a number of companies, and they're companies that have, including some of our state-owned companies, they've already developed a relationship with China, and we're looking at some important investments. So one of them is, for example, the IDC will be talking to Hebei Steel about the Phalaborwa copper and steel making facility, which I also had some conversations with them when I was there last time, and I think this could be a potentially very important new entry into steel making in South Africa.
As far as commodity prices are concerned, we're still hovering around $70 a barrel on Brent crude. Seems that's a new resistance level in some respects. It was up about 0.4 today. Positive gains also seen in gold and in coffee. Cocoa, however, relatively flat, around 28.58 per tonne. If you thought trading in Africa can be easy, think again. We'll show you the hoops traders have to go through to get goods across the border in the DRC and Congo-Brazzaville. At 18:20 GMT, welcome back. Now, these two countries we're about to talk about are literally separated by a river, but they've got fairly lukewarm trade relations between them. We're talking about the Democratic Republic of Congo and its neighbor to the west, Congo-Brazzaville. Their respective governments are doing pretty little to facilitate trade between them. Businesses on both sides of the border are literally kilometers away from each other, but they complain of tariff and non-tariff barriers that are forcing them to seek trade partners further away.
The hustle and bustle of the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital, Kinshasa. Traders here dealing in loincloths are making quick sales, but theirs is not a business for the faint-hearted. Most of these traders have had to battle stringent cross-border tariffs and travel requirements to bring in their supplies from neighboring Congo, whose capital is a stone's throw away. Despite proximity of the capital cities, Kinshasa and Brazzaville of Congo, separated by the River Congo, bilateral trade between these countries has remained low over decades due to trade barriers and high tariffs imposed on goods by both sides.
We are asked to buy the passport, visa, accommodation and paper tickets. We could be making more profit, but if one has to buy all these documents, we don't know.
The relationship between the two French-speaking sister countries has also remained lukewarm over decades. Recently, thousands of Congolese traders were expelled from Brazzaville, freezing commercial cross-border activities between the two countries. Many traders feel that trade with Congo-Brazzaville should be simplified to help grow small businesses in both countries. The new visa requirement by Congo is a case in point.
In the past, you could go to Brazzaville with $20 or $30 and buy loincloth, come and sell and still have considerable benefits. But for the moment, with the passport and visa, it is no longer enough profit. There are very few customers. This is why we asked the government to review this decision.
The strenuous requirements have made further off destinations a more preferable source market for materials.
Right now, we don't do it anymore in Brazzaville. Loincloths here we buy from abroad. We do our shopping in Dubai and China and bring loincloths that we sell. The money flows back into the population and we can make good profits as before.
Our economy at one time was essential in Congo-Brazzaville in the sense that they relied on electricity as our main source of energy. But something has changed.
Both countries are blessed with abundant mineral wealth, but it has brought little or no change to the lives of millions of their citizens who still live in poverty. Penina Karibe, CCTV.
Let's turn back the clock a bit. On this day, 1992, the world's first text message was sent. A 22-year-old Canadian test engineer, Neil Papworth, sent the words "Merry Christmas" to Richard Jarvis over at Vodafone. He used a personal computer to do that, however. See, at the time, it wasn't until 1993 that Nokia made a handset capable of sending and receiving text. But it still took even longer before SMSs became popular. By 1995, people were sending an average of 0.4 text messages a month. Today, it seems the world can't stop texting. This year alone, some 1.2 trillion messages are forecast to be sent by the 31st of December. That's roughly 200,000 text messages every second. Not to mention a lot of sore thumbs as well. Now, speaking of phones, an Israeli company says it has developed tech that can charge your handset in a few seconds and an electric car, if you happen to have a Tesla, in minutes. Using nanotech to synthesize a molecule structure, Tel Aviv-based StoreDot says it has developed a battery that can store much more charge a lot more quickly. Put another way, this acts like a super dense sponge that soaks up power and retains it. Now, while the prototype is currently a bit too bulky for use in a mobile phone, the company believes it will be ready by 2016 to come to market with a slim battery that can absorb and deliver a day's power for an entire smartphone in just 30 seconds. Certainly can't wait to get one of those on my hands. Quick run through the currencies here for you. Let's see exactly what's been going on across the board. The Naira is still showing significant weakness. Of more importance with regard to Nigeria's numbers, however, are the level of its foreign currency reserves. They're down to about 6-month lows, which should certainly be, of course, for concern for policymakers over there. Now then, here's what we're working on for tomorrow's show. We'll be looking a little deeper at South African President Jacob Zuma's trip to Beijing, China. We will also later on be looking at poultry farming in Togo. The country is seeking to bulk up and export more birds to the world. We'll tell you how exactly they plan to do that in tomorrow's program. But that's it for this edition of the program tonight. Do remember, we'd love your feedback on what we do around here. Global Business Africa at cctv.com is a relevant email. And when we're not on air, our content continues on Facebook and on Twitter. Just look for the handle at CCTV News Africa. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next 23 hours. I'm Ramanya.